My name is Maggie Peterson. I'm 78 years old, though some days I feel every one of those years. My body creaks when I get out of bed. My hands shake just a little as I pour my morning coffee, but my mind still holds on to the past like an old friend I can't let go of. The house is too quiet now. It wasn't always this way. When Jack, my late husband, was still around, our home was always filled with the sounds of family, laughter, arguments, the smell of dinner on the stove. Holidays like Easter used to be a big deal. But today it was just me. I'd spent the entire morning in the kitchen, cooking up the usual spread, roast lamb, creamy mashed potatoes, the whole shebang. I even baked a lemon meringue pie, Jenna's favorite, and a chocolate cake for Ben. I'd been planning this day for weeks, hoping it would bring the family together again, like the old times. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally come home, just like they used to. But they didn't. I stared at the clock. It was 4:30 p.m. Dinner was ready, but no one was here. The table was set for 4, but only one plate was filled. The sound of the wind outside howled through the trees, the silence in the house ringing louder than any storm could. Before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to help our channel grow. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. I called Sam first, expecting him to answer. But, as always, the call went straight to voicemail. Then Jenna. Same thing. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. I couldn't help it. My heart sank. I hadn't seen Sam or Jenna in weeks. Sure, I'd gotten the occasional text, but it wasn't the same. They didn't visit anymore. I'd been invited over to their houses maybe once or twice, but it was clear I was just a guest. A distant relative they had to tolerate. I picked up the phone and called Sam one last time. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I left a message. Hey Sam, it's Mom. Just wondering if you and Jenna were still planning on coming by for dinner. I made your favorite, and Ben's birthday cake is all ready. Call me when you can. I hung up, the silence following me like a shadow. No one was coming. No one had ever been coming. Sitting down at the table, I stared at the empty chairs. I picked up the fork and poked at my food. It was the same thing I'd done every year. Set the table, made the food, waited for them to show up. But today felt different. Today, I couldn't ignore the truth. I wasn't just forgotten. I was irrelevant. The phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. Another text from Jenna, but not about the dinner. It was about a family trip to Hawaii they'd booked for New Year's. She mentioned something about watching the dog while they were gone, but that was it. No mention of Easter, no apology for missing it. Just a quick request, like I was some sort of afterthought. It hit me hard. I had spent my life taking care of them, cooking, cleaning, babysitting, worrying over them, always there when they needed me. But today, they couldn't even show up for a simple dinner. And when I tried to make them feel guilty, they didn't even care enough to return my call. I sat there for a long time, staring at the untouched food in front of me. My heart hurt, but I didn't cry. What was the point? They were never going to change. And I wasn't going to spend another year pretending things were fine. Suddenly, without thinking, I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked to the door. The house felt like a prison, and I needed to get out. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't staying here to wait for a family who didn't want me. I reached for my phone, dialing a number I hadn't called in months. Carol Benson, a woman who lived just down the street. She was one of the few people who still took the time to ask how I was doing, even when everyone else had forgotten. When Carol picked up, I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. Instead, I just sat down on the front porch, letting the cool evening air dry the tears I hadn't even realized I'd shed. Carol, I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. I think I've had enough. I can't keep doing this. There was a long pause before Carol spoke again. Maggie, I'm so sorry. You deserve better than this. I wanted to say something else, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I hung up the phone and walked back inside. My eyes went straight to the stack of bills on the counter, the stack of to-do lists and appointments I'd been putting off for weeks. And that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I wasn't going to sit around hoping someone would notice me. I was going to live my life for me, for once. No more looking back. No more waiting by the phone. I grabbed my laptop and booked a flight. To Paris. I didn't know what awaited me there, but it didn't matter. What mattered was I wasn't going to sit here, in this empty house, another minute longer. I was done waiting for someone to show up. It was time to show up for myself. I didn't sleep much that night. The bed felt too big, too empty, even though it was just me in it. I kept staring at the ceiling, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I had bought that plane ticket to Paris without any real plan, just a desperate need to escape. Escape from the suffocating silence, from the feeling that I was nothing more than a ghost in my own family's life. I had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background. I never asked for much, just a call, a visit, a simple, "I love you" every once in a while. But I'd been waiting for those things for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to live for myself. I woke up the next morning, the morning sun spilling through the curtains in a golden stream. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel the urge to check my phone the moment I opened my eyes. I didn't have to wait for anyone's call. I didn't have to worry about making sure dinner was ready on time or cleaning up after people who never appreciated it. I got out of bed and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back at me was unfamiliar. She had gray streaks in her hair, lines on her face that came from years of laughter and tears, and a sadness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. I looked at her for a moment, taking it all in, before I smiled. It wasn't a sad smile, though. It was a real one. It was the first time in years I was truly smiling at myself. I showered, dressed, and made myself a cup of tea. The house was still quiet. No phone calls, no knocks at the door, no rush to get things done. For once, the stillness wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. I took my time getting ready. I wasn't in a hurry anymore. I didn't need to be. Around noon, I finally stepped outside, feeling the crisp air on my face. It was colder than I expected, but that didn't matter. I was leaving all of this behind, the hurt, the neglect, the years spent catering to everyone's needs except my own. It was time for something new. I made my way to the library, where I always used to go for a little peace of mind. The smell of old books and the quiet hum of the place made me feel grounded. As I walked through the door, I saw Carol sitting at one of the tables, a book in her hands. She looked up and smiled at me, her eyes soft with understanding. "Maggie, how are you holding up?" she asked, her voice warm, as if she already knew the answer. I didn't have to think about it. "Better, Carol. I'm better." I sat down across from her and we talked for a while about life, about the weather, about anything and everything. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me was shifting. Something was awakening. I wasn't just taking a trip to Paris. I was taking back my life. It was strange, this feeling of freedom, of choice. The weight that had been sitting on my chest for so long was finally lifting, and I could breathe without the constant worry of my family's expectations pressing down on me. When I left the library, I knew I wasn't just walking out the door. I was walking toward something new. I didn't know what Paris would bring, whether it would change me or just be a place to hide from the pain for a while. But I wasn't scared anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to be alone. The next morning, I was on my way to the airport. I felt a mix of nerves and excitement, but mostly anticipation. The world felt wide open in front of me, and I had no idea what was waiting, but I knew it was time to find out. When I stepped onto the plane, my heart skipped a beat. Paris. I was finally going. For me. For no one else. I wasn't sure how long I'd be there. Maybe just a few weeks. Maybe longer. But as the plane took off and the city lights of the runway faded into the distance, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was free. I had never been to Paris before. Sure, I'd read about it, watched countless movies set there, and imagined what it would be like to walk those cobbled streets, to sip coffee at a sidewalk cafe while the world passed by. But none of those thoughts had ever felt real until now. It wasn't like I was escaping. No, not exactly. It felt more like I was opening a door I had kept shut for years, just to see what was on the other side. So there I was, sitting in a tiny Parisian cafe, the warmth of the sun filtering through the window, the quiet hum of conversations in French around me, and the unmistakable buzz of excitement in the air. I had no plans, no schedule, just freedom. I sipped the coffee slowly, savoring the strong taste, and glanced out at the busy street. People walked by with a hurried pace, each one wrapped in their own little world, their own lives. A woman with a bright red scarf, a man in a well-tailored suit, a child skipping beside his mother. I couldn't help but smile, watching them all. It was beautiful. It felt like a city of possibilities, where no one cared about your past, where you could be anyone, do anything. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't worried about anyone else. I wasn't worrying about dinner, or if my kids were okay, or if I'd be forgotten yet again. Here, in this moment, I was just Maggie. No labels, no expectations, just me. I pulled my phone from my bag just to check the time, but then I noticed something. I had a few messages, texts from Sam, from Jenna. They were both apologizing for missing Easter, making excuses about work and commitments. There was even one from Jenna that said, "Sorry, Mom. Hope you're doing okay." It stung, but I didn't let it get to me. I set the phone down, deciding to leave the past where it belonged. I wasn't going to be the mother who waited anymore, the grandmother who hung on to every word, every gesture, hoping they'd remember her. If they wanted to reach out, they would, but I wasn't going to chase them anymore. Not now. Not in Paris. I decided to take a walk, just to see where my feet would take me. It wasn't far from the cafe to the Seine, and soon I found myself standing by the water, looking at the reflection of the city in the rippling surface. Boats floated by, their white sails catching the light of the afternoon sun. Tourists gathered along the bridges, taking photos, laughing, and enjoying the moment. I felt like I was part of something bigger, something that didn't have to be about family or responsibility. It wasn't about anyone else but me. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that. I didn't know what I was searching for in Paris, or if I would even find it. But I knew that in this city, there was room to find myself again. Maybe not right away. Maybe it would take weeks, months. But I was here, and that was the first step. As I walked along the river, I came across a small bookstore tucked between two buildings. The door was open, and the scent of old pages wafted out. Something about it called to me. Without thinking, I walked inside. The store was a maze of narrow aisles, each stacked with books of every size and color. The shelves creaked under the weight of so many stories. I ran my fingers along the spines, glancing at the titles in French and English. A few books caught my eye, but one in particular, a thin, leather-bound book with gold lettering, pulled me in. It wasn't the most beautiful book, but there was something about it that felt right. I picked it up and flipped through the pages. It was a collection of poems by a French poet I had never heard of. There was a quote on the inside cover that made my heart skip a beat. "The only real journey is the one that leads us back to ourselves." It struck me, deep and heavy, like it was meant for me. I bought the book, even though I didn't know exactly why. It just felt like something I needed to do. Walking out of the bookstore, I felt lighter. The world didn't feel as heavy as it had just a few hours ago. For once, I wasn't weighed down by all the things I couldn't control. I didn't have to be anyone but myself. As I made my way back to the hotel, I realized I had taken my first step into something new, something I wasn't sure of yet, but something that would eventually make sense. And in that moment, Paris didn't just feel like a city. It felt like a second chance. I had no idea where this journey would take me, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. The next few days in Paris were nothing short of transformative. The city's energy became my own. I woke up each morning with a sense of excitement, like every street corner was a new beginning. I explored, wandered, and let myself get lost in the maze of cobblestone streets, finding beauty in the smallest details. A cafe with a striped awning, a vintage shop tucked between two narrow buildings, an old woman selling fresh flowers from a cart. I felt alive again. But as much as I tried to shake it, the weight of my family's rejection lingered in the back of my mind. I couldn't avoid it forever. I knew that when I got back to the States, things wouldn't be the same. They couldn't be. Not after everything that had happened. Not after the truth I had finally allowed myself to see. I had been nothing but a safety net for Sam and Jenna. A person they called when they needed help, when they needed someone to take care of the mess they couldn't deal with. And when they didn't need me anymore, when I became a burden, they just pushed me aside. It wasn't just about missing Easter dinner. It was about the years of neglect I had been sweeping under the rug, pretending everything was fine. The first few days in Paris had been an escape, a break from the pain. But now I had to face it. I knew I had to. So I called Carol. It wasn't that I needed reassurance. I wasn't looking for sympathy, but Carol was one of the few people who could see me for who I was, not who my family wanted me to be. "Carol," I said when she answered, my voice shaking slightly, "I'm here in Paris, and I've been thinking a lot about everything. About Sam and Jenna, about how I've been living my life." I paused, looking out the window of the small cafe I'd found near the hotel. "I can't keep pretending, can I?" There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear Carol thinking carefully before she responded. "No, Maggie, you can't. And you don't have to. You've given so much of yourself to them. But now it's your time. You have to live for you." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had known it deep down. I had known for a long time that I had been pouring from an empty cup, giving everything I had until there was nothing left. But hearing someone else say it out loud made it real. "I don't know where to start," I said, running my fingers over the coffee cup in front of me. "It's so hard to let go of all of it, Carol. To let go of the hope that things could be different, that they would care enough to try. I know, Maggie. But the truth is, they're not going to change. You've already sacrificed so much for them, and they still don't see it. But you've got to start seeing it for yourself. You're not just their mother. You're Maggie. And that's enough." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. It was true. I wasn't just a mother, a grandmother, a helper. I was Maggie Peterson, a woman who deserved to be loved and cared for, not out of obligation, but because I was worth it. "Thank you, Carol," I whispered. I needed to hear that. We talked for a little while longer, but by the time we said our goodbyes, I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a sudden epiphany. But it was the beginning of something. Something I had needed for so long. I sat back in my chair and looked out at the streets of Paris, letting the world pass by. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about my children. I wasn't wondering when they would call or if they would come around. I wasn't holding my breath, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would see me. I was thinking about me, about what I wanted, about the life I still had left to live. I didn't know what was next. Maybe I'd stay in Paris for a while longer. Maybe I'd return home and try to rebuild something, but on my terms. Either way, I was done waiting for my family to decide my worth. I was the only one who could do that now. A few days later, I found myself sitting in a small Parisian park, the kind of place you wouldn't find in any tourist guide. It was tucked away, hidden behind ivy-covered gates, with benches under ancient trees and flowered beds bursting with color. The sun was warm for the season, but there was a slight breeze that made the leaves rustle softly. It was peaceful. It was the kind of peace I'd been searching for. But as much as I loved the quiet, there was something else bubbling beneath the surface. Something I knew I couldn't escape forever. The truth about my family was still there, and it wasn't going to go away just because I had boarded a plane and crossed an ocean. I had been avoiding it, avoiding the calls, avoiding the confrontation. But that didn't change the reality. I had spent my entire life being the reliable one, the one who was always there when they needed me. And now, as I sat in this park in Paris, I realized that I had to face the inevitable. I had to deal with them, or at the very least, decide once and for all how to stop letting them control my life. I took a deep breath, my fingers grazing the screen of my phone. Without thinking, I dialed Sam's number. My heart pounded in my chest as the phone rang. For a moment, I almost hung up. What was I even going to say? It wasn't him I was afraid of. It was the weight of everything that had built up between us. The lies, the neglect, the way they had pushed me aside for so long. I wasn't ready to face that, but I didn't have a choice anymore. The phone clicked, and Sam's voice came through. "Mom!" I didn't speak at first. My throat felt tight, but I forced the words out. "Sam, it's me. I need to talk." There was silence on the other end. I could hear the sounds of what I imagined was his office, the click of a keyboard, the shuffle of papers. But finally he spoke. "I didn't expect to hear from you, Mom. I thought you were doing fine. You've always been independent." It stung. I knew he meant it to be dismissive, but the words hit harder than I expected. My independence. Since when had he cared about that? "I am fine," I said, my voice calm, though my heart was racing. "I'm in Paris, Sam. I've been thinking a lot about us." There was another silence, a moment where I could almost feel the walls going up between us. "Paris? You're really going to make this about you going to Paris?" "No," I said quickly, not wanting him to misunderstand. I'm not making it about the trip. I'm making it about me. About how I've been treated. About how you've treated me. His voice shifted then, a little more defensive. Mom, I didn't mean for things to get so distant. I'm just busy with work. Jenna is too. We have our own lives, and you've got yours. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. A cold, sharp laugh escaped my lips, though I quickly swallowed it. You don't get it, do you, Sam? I asked softly. You really don't. This isn't just about being busy or having our own lives. It's about the fact that you've stopped making time for me. You've pushed me aside like I'm a burden. I could hear him shift in his chair, the silence hanging heavily in the air. That's not fair. You know that isn't true. But I wasn't done. I had to say it. I had to get it out once and for all. Sam, the truth is, I've spent years making excuses for you and Jenna. I've convinced myself that it was okay to be the background character in your lives because I thought that's what mothers do. I thought that's what family does. But I've realized that I've been doing it all wrong. Another pause, and then his voice, quieter now, more reluctant. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying that I'm not going to play that role anymore. I said, my voice firm, even though it felt like I was standing on the edge of something big. I've spent my whole life putting everyone else first, Sam. I've been there for you through every big moment, every crisis, every joy and every sorrow. But I can't do it anymore. I've given everything I had to you, and now it's my turn. He was silent for so long that I almost thought he'd hung up on me. But then he spoke, his voice breaking the tension. I didn't realize. I didn't know you felt this way. I've been trying to make you realize it for years, but you never listened, I said softly, my heart aching at the truth. But I'm done. I'm not just your mother, Sam. I'm Maggie, and it's time I started living for me. The line went quiet again, and I could hear the faint hum of traffic in the distance as I stood there, holding the phone, waiting. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't expect him to suddenly change. But for the first time, I didn't feel the need to wait for it. I hope one day you understand, Sam, I said quietly, finally breaking the silence. But until then, I'm going to take care of myself. I hung up without waiting for a response. It was hard. My heart was heavy, but my mind was clear. This was the right choice. For me. And if they didn't understand it, well, that was something I'd have to live with. But for now, I wasn't going to worry about that. I was in Paris, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally starting to live for me. The week in Paris was everything I needed. The city, with its busy streets, vibrant cafes, and quiet corners, had given me the space to think, to breathe, and to rediscover who I was when I wasn't someone's mother or grandmother. I had wandered through museums, sat in parks, and read the poetry book I had bought, savoring every word. Paris had become a place where I could just be Maggie. But as much as I tried to escape, I knew the time was coming to face the truth of what I'd left behind. No matter how far I ran, the issues with my family were still there. And sooner or later, I would have to go back. It was a quiet morning when I sat in the little apartment I had rented in Paris, sipping my coffee by the window. The apartment had become my sanctuary. I had felt at peace here, a peace I hadn't known in years. But now, as the sun streamed through the windows, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was avoiding something. Avoiding the reality I was returning to. I hadn't called Sam or Jenna since our last conversation. I had thought about it, but the words always got stuck in my throat. I wasn't sure what else I could say. I had said everything I needed to say. But still, there was a small part of me that wondered if they'd somehow come to understand. That maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. When the flight back to the States was finally booked, I didn't feel the same excitement I had when I'd left. There was a knot in my stomach, a nervousness I couldn't shake. What would they say when I got back? What would they think? The flight was long. I didn't sleep much. Instead, I stared out of the window, lost in thoughts of everything I had left behind. The house, the years I had spent serving my family, the love I had given without ever asking for anything in return. When I landed, the reality of the situation hit me as soon as I stepped off the plane. The rush of people moving in every direction, the bright lights of the airport, everything felt overwhelming. I had been living in Paris, breathing a different air, a new kind of freedom. But now, here I was, standing in a life I had tried to escape for a few days. I didn't head straight home. Instead, I went to the library, a quiet place where I could gather my thoughts. As I sat there, flipping through a book I had picked up, my phone buzzed in my bag. It was a text from Sam. "Mom, we need to talk. Please come by the house. Jenna and I are worried about you." I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the screen. They were worried about me? Was this real? Did they actually care? After everything that had happened, after all the silence, now they were concerned? I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say, not yet. Instead, I left the library and walked back to my apartment. I could feel the weight of the text pressing on me with every step. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Part of me wanted to go, to give them a chance to explain themselves. But another part of me knew that nothing would change. They had shown me who they were. And now, I needed to show them who I was. The next morning, I finally decided to visit the house. It wasn't about a confrontation, it was about reclaiming my place. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there, but I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. As I walked up to the front door, I hesitated for just a moment. It had been so long since I had stepped through this door without feeling like I was invisible. Now, I wasn't sure what I would find on the other side. Sam answered the door, his face tight and tense, his eyes avoiding mine. "Mom," he said, his voice low. "Come in." I stepped inside, the familiar scent of their home surrounding me. But this time, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a place I didn't belong anymore. "I'm sorry," Sam said, his voice shaky. "I should have been better. I should have understood. Should have." I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. "Sam, it's too late for should-haves. You've had your chance. You've had years to make things right, and you didn't. I'm not going to sit here and beg for scraps of your attention anymore." Jenna came into the room, her face full of worry. "Mom, we've been so worried about you. We didn't know what to think. You left without saying anything, and now we're scared." Scared? I wanted to laugh. They hadn't been scared when they pushed me aside. They hadn't been scared when they lied to me and ignored me for years. Scared. I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "I'm the one who's been scared. Scared of losing myself while trying to be everything for you." "Well, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not afraid of losing you anymore, Sam. But I won't let you treat me like I don't matter." There was silence for a long moment, and I could see the guilt in Sam's eyes. Jenna looked between us, unsure of how to respond. Finally, Sam spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I never wanted to make you feel like this." "I know you didn't mean it, Sam," I said softly, "but that doesn't change what's been done. I've spent my life sacrificing for you, for Jenna, for this family. But now, it's time to live for myself." Jenna's face softened, and for a moment, I saw the daughter I had once known. "I understand, Mom," she whispered. "I really do. I'm sorry for everything." And in that moment, I knew that things had shifted. Maybe not everything had been fixed, but it was a start. I wasn't done fighting for my place in this world. But for the first time, I was fighting for the right reasons, because I mattered, not because they needed me. The days that followed were a mix of clarity and discomfort. It was a strange feeling, to finally speak my truth after all these years. There was a weight lifted, but it was also replaced by something else, a new responsibility. I couldn't go back to the way things were, to the version of myself that kept quiet, that let people walk all over her just to keep the peace. But even as I stood firm, part of me worried that this new version of me would drive my family further away. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I had always been the one who bent over backwards for them, the one who forgave, the one who gave and gave and gave. Now I was telling them no, and that felt strange. Empowering, yes, but also deeply unsettling. I spent the next few days in the city, taking long walks along the Seine, finding small cafes to sit in and read my book. Each day felt like a new beginning, and yet I couldn't shake the thought that I was standing at the edge of something I hadn't fully understood yet. Something was shifting inside me, but I wasn't sure where it was going. And then, one afternoon, as I sat on a bench near Notre Dame, the phone rang again. It was Sam. I stared at the screen for a moment, wondering what this call would be about. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let the silence settle in between us. But then I realized I couldn't run from this. I had faced the truth once, and I wasn't about to back down now. I answered the call. Mom, Sam's voice was softer this time, the usual edge of frustration gone. We need to talk. I took a deep breath. Sam, I think we've talked enough. I've said what I needed to say. I know, he replied quickly. But I've been thinking about it and I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I'd been hurting you. I've taken you for granted for years, and it wasn't fair. I'm not making excuses, Mom. I just want to make things right. There was a quiet sincerity in his voice that made my heart ache. It had been a long time since I heard him speak like that. He had always been the strong, dependable one, the one I thought I could rely on. But I realized now that I had been too dependent on him, too reliant on the idea of him being the son I wanted him to be, instead of accepting the person he had become. I don't know if things can go back to how they were, Sam, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You've hurt me in ways I didn't even realize until recently. But I don't want to fight with you. I want us to find a way to coexist, to understand each other. But I'm not going to keep sacrificing myself to make things easier for you or Jenna anymore. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I understand, Mom. I really do. And I'll work on it. I'll work on being the son you deserve. But I need you to know that I do care. I may not have shown it the way you wanted, but I care. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I pushed them down. I wasn't going to let this break me again. This wasn't about fixing everything all at once. It was about creating space for us both to change, for us to be different people than we had been before. Thank you, Sam, I said, my voice steady. That's all I needed to hear. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, the knot in my chest loosening just a little. Maybe it wasn't the end of everything. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I had finally found the strength to demand what I deserved, not just from Sam and Jenna, but from myself. As I walked back to my hotel, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed in such a short time. A few weeks ago, I had been a woman waiting for a phone call that never came, a woman who was invisible in her own family. And now, I was a woman who had found her voice again, who was ready to speak up and live for herself. The Paris I had imagined all those years ago wasn't just a city of romance and adventure. It was a city of renewal. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else to change things for me. I was making the change myself. A few days after my conversation with Sam, I returned home, back to the small apartment that had become my sanctuary. It wasn't much, barely enough space to stretch out fully, but it was mine. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I had something to call my own. And yet, even as I settled back into my routine, the nagging feeling of unfinished business hung over me. The phone call with Sam had been a step in the right direction, but I knew there was more to be done. I had spoken my truth, but I hadn't confronted them in person. I hadn't yet had the courage to face Sam and Jenna directly, to let them see who I was now. I was still that woman they had taken for granted, the one who quietly endured, waiting for their approval. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I had done things differently this time. I had walked away. I had taken time for myself. And now I had to go back, not to beg for their love or understanding, but to show them that I would no longer be the woman they could dismiss. I dialed Sam's number again, but this time, I wasn't calling to ask if he would come over. I wasn't calling to plead for his attention. I was calling to set boundaries. I was calling to let him know that I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself anymore. Mom! Sam answered after a few rings. His voice was cautious, but it didn't carry the same defensive edge it once had. I need to see you, Sam, I said, my voice steady. We need to talk. In person. There was a long pause, and then he sighed. Okay. When? Where? I knew this conversation wouldn't be easy. I didn't expect it to be, but it had to be done. I'll meet you at the cafe by the park in an hour. And bring Jenna. We need to have this conversation together. I hung up before he could protest. It wasn't that I didn't want to give him space to process everything. It was just that I wasn't going to hide anymore. I wasn't going to let the conversation drag on for weeks. The moment had arrived. The cafe was small and quiet when I arrived, the kind of place where you could sit for hours without anyone rushing you. I sat down at a table near the window, my hands folded in front of me. I wasn't nervous. I was prepared. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. When Sam and Jenna walked in, they looked different. Sam's face was tense, his usual confident stride replaced with a hesitant shuffle. Jenna, as always, wore a mask of concern, but it was clear she wasn't sure how to handle the situation. They sat across from me, and there was a heavy silence before either of them spoke. "Maggie," Sam started, but I raised a hand, signaling for him to stop. I wasn't here to let them apologize over and over again. "I'm not here for apologies," I said, my voice clear. "I'm here because I want you both to understand something." Jenna looked at me, her eyes wide. "What's going on, Mom? You've been distant. You left without telling anyone. We've been worried about you." I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to let them make me feel guilty for finally doing what I should have done years ago. I wasn't worried about being distant, Jenna. I was worried about how much I had been giving, and how little I had left for myself. I've spent years accommodating you both, trying to fix everything, trying to be everything. But I've realized something. I don't need to be that person anymore. Sam opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. This isn't about you two. This is about me. I've spent my life putting everyone else first, and I'm done. You don't get to treat me like I'm invisible anymore. You don't get to ignore me, to make excuses, to push me aside just because it's easier for you. I'm not a burden, Sam. I'm your mother, and it's time you start treating me like I matter. There was a long pause. Sam's eyes were on the table now, his hands fidgeting with his cup. Jenna shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I could see they both wanted to say something, but the words were caught in their throats. Finally, Sam spoke up, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I thought I was just trying to manage everything to get through life. But I see now that I've taken you for granted." Jenna nodded, but she didn't speak right away. Instead, she looked at me, her expression a mixture of guilt and regret. "We're sorry, Mom," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to make you feel like you weren't important. I didn't see it until now." I took a deep breath, not out of anger, but because I knew this was my moment. It was time to stand firm. "Sorry isn't enough, Jenna. You can't just apologize and expect everything to be fine. I'm not asking you to change overnight, but I'm asking for respect. You both have to realize that I'm not here to be your backup plan, your fixer, your solution when things go wrong. I'm here to live my life, too." There was silence again, but this time, it felt different. This time, it wasn't the kind of silence that came from unresolved tension. It was the kind of silence that came when people finally understood what had been left unsaid for too long. "I'm not going to disappear when I'm inconvenient," I said softly but firmly. "I won't let you push me aside anymore. If you want a relationship with me, then it has to be based on respect, not just when it's easy for you." Sam looked up at me, his face softer than it had been in a long time. "I understand, Mom. I really do." Jenna looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to lose you." "I'm not going anywhere," I replied, my voice steady. "But things have to change, and that starts now." It had been a week since my conversation with Sam and Jenna. A week since I had finally found the courage to stand up for myself, to let them know that I wasn't going to keep being the person who silently waited for their love and attention. I didn't expect everything to change overnight. I knew that, but I could feel the shift, like a small crack opening up in the wall I had built around myself. I spent most of that week reflecting, taking long walks around the neighborhood, sitting on the park bench, where I had first found the courage to make that phone call to Sam. I knew I wasn't done yet. There was more work to be done, both with my family and with myself. But the quiet joy of being in control of my own life was something I hadn't felt in years. Paris had given me more than just a break from the chaos. It had given me a glimpse of what life could be like when I wasn't always living in someone else's shadow. When I wasn't trying to fit myself into a role that no longer worked for me. The phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was from Sam. "Mom, can we meet? I think we're ready to talk more. Just the three of us." I felt a surge of mixed emotions, nervousness, anticipation, but also a deep sense of pride. He was reaching out. They were both reaching out. This was it, the chance to rebuild something. But it wouldn't be the same. It couldn't be. This time, the rules were different. I agreed to meet them at the same cafe we had been to last time. As I walked there, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The years of sacrifice, the quiet hurt I had swallowed down, the loneliness I had masked behind my smile. When I walked into the cafe, Sam and Jenna were already sitting at a table by the window. Sam looked a little nervous, his hands gripping his coffee cup as he glanced up at me. Jenna, too, had that familiar look of concern in her eyes, but there was something else in them now, something softer, something more open. They both stood when I approached, and Sam gave me a tentative smile. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice almost too soft. "We've been talking, and we just wanted to let you know that we're sorry. Really sorry. I think we've taken you for granted, and we want to do better." Jenna nodded, her eyes full of emotion. "You've always been there for us, and we've never really acknowledged how much you've done. I've been blind to it, and I see now how wrong I've been." It was strange hearing them say these things, but it didn't feel like empty words this time. There was a sincerity in their voices that hadn't been there before. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't enough to erase the years of hurt, but it was a start. A real start. I sat down across from them, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't rush to speak. I needed them to understand. This wasn't about me accepting their apologies. It was about them understanding what had been lost. What I had lost. I've spent my whole life being the one who gives, I said quietly, looking both of them in the eyes. But I've realized something, too. I've spent so much time being everything for everyone else that I forgot about myself. I forgot that I have needs, that I deserve respect and love, not just when it's convenient. Sam looked down, and I could see the weight of my words hitting him. "We've been selfish, Mom." "I've been selfish," he said, his voice raw. "I never meant to make you feel like you didn't matter." Jenna reached across the table, her hand resting gently on mine. "I don't want you to feel like a burden anymore. I don't want you to feel like you're invisible in our lives. You're not. You've always been so much more than that to us." I sat back, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. This wasn't just a conversation about making things right. This was about setting a new foundation, one where I wasn't just the person who existed in the background of their lives. I was a person who had the right to ask for more time, more love, more respect. "Thank you," I said softly, "but I can't keep pretending I'm okay with just being your backup plan. I've spent years giving everything I had, and I've lost so much in the process. But I'm done being invisible." There was a long silence after that, a silence that felt like it was stretching across the table, across the years of hurt and misunderstanding. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was different, because for the first time, I felt like I was finally being heard. Finally, Sam spoke, his voice steady. "I know, Mom. I get it now. I really do. And I'm sorry. I'll do better." "I will too," Jenna added, her voice softer now. "I don't want you to feel alone anymore." I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For now, it was enough. We sat there for a while longer, the three of us, talking about the things we never really talked about before. There was no grand resolution, no perfect solution. But there was something more important than that. Understanding. Real understanding. And that, for the first time in a long while, felt like enough. I left the cafe that day with a sense of quiet contentment. The tension that had filled the air between me and my children was gone, replaced with something softer, something more genuine. We weren't fixed. There was still work to be done, still healing to be had, but it was a start. A real start this time. As I walked back to my apartment, I realized how much had changed in such a short amount of time. I had come to Paris thinking I was running away from my family, from my responsibilities, from the pain of being ignored. But in the end, I hadn't run away. I had run toward something new, something I hadn't even known I was searching for. I had run toward myself. The days that followed were filled with small victories. I didn't rush to fix everything, to make up for lost time. No, this time, I gave myself the grace to just be. To take things one step at a time. I spent the next few weeks reconnecting with my children, not in the frantic, guilt-ridden way I had before, but in a way that felt healthier. We shared meals, but they were no longer about me trying to impress or please. They were about simply being together, about acknowledging each other's presence without the need for apologies or explanations. Jenna came over one evening to visit, and we talked for hours, something we hadn't done in years. Sam stopped by on the weekends, not because he felt obligated, but because he genuinely wanted to. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my family was seeing me. And not just seeing me, they were appreciating me. But it wasn't just about them. I had changed too. I wasn't the woman who waited by the phone anymore. I wasn't the one who sacrificed everything to make sure everyone else was okay. I was living for me now, and that felt like freedom. The next month, I went back to Paris. But this time, I went with a new sense of purpose. I didn't need to escape anymore. I didn't need to run away from my life. I went because I wanted to. I went because I deserved to. Walking down the streets of Paris again, I felt a strange sense of ownership, like the city was no longer a foreign place but a part of my own story. I had learned something here. I had learned that I didn't have to be anyone else's idea of what a mother or a grandmother should be. I didn't have to wait for anyone to decide my worth. I was enough, just as I was. As I stood in front of the Eiffel Tower, watching the lights shimmer in the dusk, I thought about all the things I had learned. About the courage it took to walk away from what didn't serve me. About the strength it took to speak up for myself when everyone else had ignored my voice for so long. About the quiet power of living life on my own terms. And then I smiled. A real smile. Not the kind of smile I used to give when I was pretending, but the kind that came from deep within me. The kind that said, I've made it. I'm here. And I'm finally free. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a phone call. I wasn't waiting for someone else to change. I was living, fully and completely, for myself. And that, I realized, was the most important journey of all.